Krista here. So many of you have been emailing me asking, hey, what camera model should I have? What lenses should I have? What else should I have on hand if I'm wanting to get into photography? So I just wanted to do a quick little video and address all of those things. Now in this video, I'm talking specifically about people who are doing this for a hobby, stay-at-home moms, people who are traveling, things like that. These cameras may not be, if you're looking to get into photography on a very large scale and start your own studio and that type of thing, this probably isn't the video for you. This is more if you're just getting started and wanting to get something inexpensive and easy. So, all of that being said, I'm a big believer in you don't have to have the latest, greatest gear. You can have stuff that's a little older that you find on Craigslist, on your local garage sale site, on Facebook. They have Marketplace now. You can look for a lot of things, or even Amazon has a lot of great overstock, and I'll link to that below. Overstock items that are a few years old and just never sold, but they're still brand new. So I'm a big believer in not spending a ton of money on getting started in this. So some of you might email me and say, hey Krista, in that video you have an old model and it's 7 or 8 years old. Yes, that's what I'm going for. I'm trying to give you models that you can work with and afford and get into for a pretty inexpensive amount. Okay, so I usually shoot with mainly Canon gear. That being said, I love my Canon gear, but Nikon, Sony, a lot of the big manufacturers out there have great camera models. And so I'm not saying you shouldn't buy one of those, and in fact I'm going to link to some of those below. But personally, I've just always shot with Canon. So I love Canon gear. Rebels are great cameras to get started with, and some of these other models I'm going to show you in a minute. So what are the things you should look for when you're trying to find a camera? Let's say you find one on Facebook Marketplace and you're trying to decide, well, is this a good deal or is it not? There are a few things I want you to look for in that camera specifically. First of all, we don't want it to be any older than 10 years old. And even that, I'd say 10 years is maybe a little old still. If you can afford it, I would prefer for it to be 5 years or newer. If that is too expensive, you can go all the way up to 10 years old and you can still get a pretty decent camera with good megapixel range, ISO range, and all of that type of thing. But ideally, I would say about 5 years old or newer would be ideal. Secondly, let's say 10 megapixels. We want at least 10 megapixels. So when you're reading through the camera specs, you want to make sure it says 10 megapixels or more, like 11, 12, on up to 20. Most cameras in the more inexpensive range are going to be between 10 and 20 megapixels. What megapixels are, just in a nutshell, if you get below 10 megapixels, you're going to start getting like real pixelated photos, and when you print them, they're not going to look very good. They're going to look kind of blurry, and they're going to have like they're just not going to look good. So above 10 megapixels is what you want when you're looking for a used camera or a new one. Okay, that's my second thing. Third, well, we'll go over lenses here in just a minute, but the third thing is, for a beginner camera, I would love for it to have a pop-up flash, okay? Eventually, I'm going to teach you how to use like a big flash, something like this. And yes, this one's older. Again, y'all don't email me and say, that one looks beat up and old. Yes, that's what I'm going for here. Maybe not beat up, but this one is an older model and you can find these for super cheap, okay? But we'll talk about this later. But right now, I want you to have one that has a pop-up flash, because when you're doing night photos, to invest in a big flash is gonna be a lot of money. So to have a little flash that will pop up on the top is ideal. So that's your third thing I want you to look for in buying a camera. And then the last thing is, I want you to make sure that it has an ISO range of up to 6400. And what that means is you can take pictures in darker settings and they won't be super grainy and won't look bad. So I want your camera to be able to go up to 6400 ISO. So let's just recap. Canon, Nikon, Sony, all great cameras. I'm not really concerned about the brand. You do want to make sure that it is a DSLR, meaning a digital camera. It takes digital pictures, not film. And an SLR, usually an easy way to tell is the lens is going to come off the front. So if you're looking at a camera online and the lens doesn't come off, it's not a big one like this, it's probably not a DSLR. A DSLR will not fit in your pocket, and the lens does come off. So those are some easy ways to tell that it is actually a digital SLR. So one of the main brands, a digital SLR, we want more than 10 megapixels. We want it less than 10 years old, preferably about 5 years or newer. And we want a pop-up flash on the top. And we want an ISO range of up to 6400 ISO so that you can take pictures in darker areas and they'll look nice. Next, a lot of people ask me about lenses. And a lot of times when you buy a camera, you know, if you buy a kit, it comes with a lot of stuff. If you bought it on Amazon or something like that, it's going to come with a lens, typically speaking. Now, depending on what package you get, there are 5 million different packages you can buy. Typically speaking, the lens that comes with the camera body is not going to be the one you want. Usually they just put kind of the cheapest one on there to get you going, and for them to say, hey, it has a lens, you're set to go. It does have a lens, but it's not usually like the best lens that you're going to want. Okay, so one of my favorite lenses to get started with is a Tamron. It's kind of an off-brand. A lot of people, this is a pretty obscure lens. A lot of people don't even know about this lens, but it is one of my favorites because it has a lower aperture, and what that means is how blurry the background is going to be behind your subject. If you have a low aperture, let's say like this one is a 2.8, your subject, like their eyes are going to be nice and in focus, but everything behind them is going to be nice and soft, blurry, that blurry focus behind them. I personally love that look. So I love this lens for that reason. It's going to give you that beautiful artistic look. That being said, if you want a sharp background, you can certainly do that with this lens, but most lenses don't have the capability to get that nice, pretty background, the blurry background behind your subject. So this is the Tamron 28 to 75 millimeter lens. I'll link to it below, and it zooms in and zooms out, which is great because some lenses that might come with your camera, they will not be able to zoom in and out. So if you're trying to photograph a kiddo or your dog moving, or you're traveling and you're trying to get things that are far off in the distance and things that are close, this is a great versatile lens because you can zoom in, you can zoom out, it has that low aperture, and it's a very reliable lens. I've had many of these lenses throughout the years. I give them to my assistants when they're second shooting weddings. And it's just a great all-around lens. We use the heck out of these. And in comparison to a similar lens from, let's say, Canon or Nikon, this is almost a third of the cost. It's still not going to be super cheap. It's still not $20 or anything. So if you're on super duper budget, just use whatever lens comes with the camera and use whatever you can afford. But ideally, if you can spend a little bit on a lens, I would highly recommend this lens as your first starter lens. This will get you great results. It'll be very versatile, and you'll just be able to use the heck out of it and get a lot of great results. That's my first recommendation. Okay, second recommendation. I have a lot of you that say, hey, I really want to take this camera to my kids' sporting event and get photos of them out on the field. Let's say your child plays soccer or football during the day. We'll talk about night photos later. But anything where you're far away, a lot of people assume that when they get a new camera, they get one of these big cameras, that automatically those photos are going to be amazing of kids way far out on the field. That's not necessarily true, okay? That is dependent so much on your lens. This lens that I showed you first of all is very good for everyday use and for portraits and a lot of, I would say probably 80% of the photos you're going to do, this photo is great for, or this lens is great for. But if you're trying to take photos of a kiddo that's way out on the field and you want it to be like that Sports Illustrated, that close-up, action photo where the ball is going in the air, and you know, you freeze that moment in time in very close up, that lens is not going to cut it. You're going to need a lens that goes out to about 300 millimeters. Now this lens is, it's summertime and my dog's laying right here. Here comes a fly flying into our little photo thing here. Anyway, okay, so this lens is 75 to 300 millimeters, and this lens will get you a great photo of your kiddo out on the field playing soccer. It is inexpensive too. It's a cheap lens in comparison to some of the big sporting lenses. There are some lenses that they use at football games and other sporting events that are $40,000. Okay, this lens is not in that category at all. This lens is going to be very cheap in the lens world, and it's going to get you great results. So this is my next recommendation if you want far away action sports photos. Or let's say you're a nature photographer and you want photos of a deer or an animal that's very far off in the distance because you don't want to get close to like a bear or anything like that. This lens will help you get something very far off in good detail. Okay, so again, this is your Canon 75 to 300 millimeter lens, and it's 4 to 5.6 aperture. My second recommendation. Okay, third lens recommendation. Let's say you are wanting to do some really pretty portraits. Either you're wanting to get into photography as a business, or you just have kiddos at home and you really want to take some beautiful portraits of them. The first lens I showed you will do a very good job of doing that. But if you want to just take it to the next level, this is your go-to lens. This lens is used by so many of us professional photographers. We use it doing portraits, doing weddings, doing all kinds of things. And it is your 85 millimeter 1.8 Canon. This is also available in Nikon and the other brands too, but this specific one I'm showing you is Canon. The thing about this lens is it is a 1.8 aperture, which means someone's eyes are going to be in focus, and then behind them, almost even their ears is going to be out of focus, and it's going to be this beautiful blurred background. It's a gorgeous lens, and your clients or your friends and family will love the way this looks when you show them the picture you just took with it. It is a prime lens, and what that means is that it does not zoom in and out. So this is why I would not recommend this lens as my first choice, because it's not as versatile. If you have something close up to you, you cannot zoom out or zoom in based on how far away your object or your subject is. But what it lacks in zooming in and zooming out, it makes up for in sharpness. A prime lens is typically much sharper than a zoom lens. So this lens is going to have that beautiful background. It's going to be a beautiful portrait lens, but it does not zoom in and out. But it is much sharper than the other lenses that I previously told you about. So this would be my third recommendation, especially if you're wanting to get into photography as a business or as a side little job, or you just want amazing portraits of your kiddos and your family. This is not a great lens for, I mean, it could be used for nature photography, but I wouldn't really recommend this lens. This is more of a portrait type lens, so portraits of people. So this would be my third recommendation on my list of favorite lenses. Okay, so that covers my third lens, and let's talk a little bit about computer and Photoshop needs if you're getting into photography and just getting started. Okay, so your camera right off the bat will take amazing photos, and you can take the photos straight from here and do whatever you want to with them, and they'll look really good. But if you want to take it to the next level and really get amazing results with these cameras, a lot of people prefer to take their photos into Photoshop and perfect them in that program, whether it be adding sharpness, whether it be like adding more contrast or more coloring. You can do all of those things in Photoshop, but you do need a fairly able computer. So the few things I would recommend with a computer, if you want to take your photos to the next level and bring them into Photoshop, you're going to need a copy of Photoshop CC. I'll link to that below. We'll talk about that more here in a minute. You're also going to need a fairly substantial computer, either a laptop or a desktop. I would not recommend trying to use this on an iPad, your iPhone, anything like that. So you need a laptop or a desktop. I would recommend at least 8 gigabytes of RAM, if not more. The more you can get, the better. But again, the more you get, the more expensive it is. So do whatever you can within your budget, but I would recommend at least 8 gigabytes of RAM, because otherwise what's going to happen is your computer's going to choke and you're going to have to wait and wait and wait while that little dumb spinny wheel goes on forever and ever, and you're going to get really frustrated. I know, because I've been there. So 8 gigabytes of RAM, you need at least a 500 gigabyte hard drive, and what would be ideal is to have a little external hard drive of at least 500 gigabytes, because your photos are large files and they're going to fill up your storage really fast on your computer. We could go into a bunch of other things, but just for getting started, those are the 2 things I would mainly look at in your computer. Then you're going to want a copy of Photoshop CC. It used to be that Photoshop was $800 to buy, and luckily Photoshop has been very smart here lately and has lowered that entry-level price to $9.99 a month, and it's so much more affordable to get in and get a copy of Photoshop than it used to be. Used to be you would save up that $800, it would take you forever, you'd buy Photoshop, and then they'd come out with an update and you'd have to buy it all over again, and it was just a nightmare. I mean, you just felt like you were always spending all of your money on buying Photoshop. But no longer do you have to do that. You can just buy Photoshop CC for $9.99 a month. Again, I'll link to it below in case you do not have it. A lot of you might ask me, well, hey, I've heard I should use Lightroom, or I should use this program, or I should use this program. I personally prefer to keep things simple. I do everything in Photoshop, whether that be in Bridge. Photoshop kind of has some side programs included with it, being Bridge and Adobe Camera Raw. So those are included in the download that you can get for that $9.99 a month. And I'll explain that in a different lesson, how to use all of those. But just know that you do need Adobe Photoshop CC and that computer, either a desktop or laptop with those specs to get started. Okay, let's talk about just a couple quick accessories and then we'll be done here. We talked about all of your main elements, your cameras, your lenses, the computer, Photoshop. A couple things that you will need that you might not think of. If you order a camera kit online, a lot of times it'll already come with these things. But sometimes if you get something on Craigslist or on Facebook Marketplace, it may just be the camera body and you won't get a bunch of extras. So a few things you are going to need. First of all, you're going to need a CF card, okay? Depending on the camera model, it might be called an SD card and it might be a little smaller, but it's the same thing. You put this into the camera and it stores the pictures on this little card, okay? So you're gonna need a few of these. I would recommend at least 16 gigabytes or more is my preference, because if you get any smaller, you're gonna run out of room on your card pretty fast. So you need at least a few of these, okay? Secondly, you're going to need at least a battery, if not more than one battery. And let me just pop this out real quick. Here's your battery, okay? You're gonna need at least a couple of these to go with your camera. I prefer having 2, because then if this one runs out, I've already got another one charged and ready to go in there, and then I can swap this one onto the charger. So you're gonna need 1 or 2 batteries and the charger that goes along with it. Usually when you order the batteries, there's a lot of packages that come with the charger automatically, but if it does not come with a charger, you're gonna need to get one of those separately. And that, my friends, is about it. That's what you need to get started with everything. Again, I know that not everyone can afford to buy everything that I just listed. So to start, you just want mainly your camera body, 1 lens, a battery, and a CF card. That's really all you need to get started on the very base level. And then from there, you can build with more lenses, more batteries, more CF cards, and then eventually get your Photoshop CC on your computer so that you can take those photos to the next level. Anyway, I hope that helps. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them for me below. I'll do my best to answer them. And click subscribe below so you can get all the updates on new lessons and new things coming across YouTube here. And thanks for your time. Hope that helped.